Hi, it's Joy Foster, founder of TechPixies and the host of the Sparkle and Thrive podcast. And we have a special guest with us today, Paula Campion, who has background in the TV industry. We're going to talk about transferable skills, and she's had several times in her career where her skills have transferred. So, Paula, welcome to the podcast, and let's get started by telling your story.
Hello there. Well, this is exciting, isn't it? I'm like on the other side, in front of the camera or in front of the microphone. I'm used to telling the other person what to do.
I love it. So you were a nurse originally before you got into TV. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I always wanted to work in media, but at my school, you go and see your careers person, and saying I wanted to be in television was like saying I want to be an astronaut. It was just like, so I decided to go to university. I wanted to do a practical degree. I wanted to do something where I could travel with it a bit, where I could always use it, where I'd always be in work. So I went to go and do a nursing degree. Unfortunately, I realised pretty soon on I'm not very good with blood, which isn't great for being a nurse. So I went into mental health nursing, which I really enjoyed, actually. It was a real challenge. And I think the thing about mental health nursing is, whereas with general nursing, these are the steps and these are what you have to provide to, if you've got a broken leg, these are the tools you need. This is the equipment you need. As a mental health nurse, you're the tool. So I found that quite challenging and interesting. But then I still had this desire to get into the media. I did a bit of work experience at Manchester radio station, which was great. And then I applied for an internship with a big company who at the time was sort of turned into Endemol. They're now Banijay. They're a big company out there. I got down to the last 20, went to the workshop, didn't get the job to become it was like an internship, a creative internship. And I was absolutely gutted not to have got that job. And then I went off traveling. A few weeks later, they called me up and said, actually, would you be interested in being a researcher? We've got a new show coming out of Manchester, which was the most bonkers show. It was an hour's live show around the Trafford Centre about shopping, and one of the presenters was Tommy from Ground Force. I mean, it was just bonkers. Anyway, that's where it all began, and that's where I got my first job into TV. And then after 4 months, my next job was on Ready Steady Cook when Ainsley Harriott took over, and when it was a massive show, and we got some amazing stars on there. Got to work with Jackie Collins was on it, Cliff Richard came on it, Steps came on it. So yeah, that was fun.
And you've worked on some of the major shows, any shows involving sort of housing and luxury. That's right?
Yeah, so I guess it tends to be lifestyle-based shows a lot of the time. So MasterChef I've done. I set up Phil and Kirsty's Love It or List It, that's still going strong now on Channel 4. But I've also done access documentaries. So I did one with Sotheby's estate agents. I did a documentary about mental health called Bye Bye Happiness, which actually won an award for most entertaining documentary. So I guess my favourite kind of shows are the one that has purpose at the heart of it, but that can entertain to a wide audience and get people talking. Those are the best shows.
Well, and the one that I love that you worked on was Sex Education.
Yeah, the Sex Education show. I'm so proud of that. So that was 15 years ago, and I think it's still really relevant today, because we went into schools and it was before sex education was compulsory. And the idea was that this was the first generation that had only been brought up with the internet, and that's where they were learning their sex education. And they weren't learning about sex and relationships. They were just learning about the sex part. So what we went into the schools and we looked at how can we broaden that. And I remember on the first day that we did this massive assembly, and we had these life models that we had on screen that were interactive. So the kids could ask questions about their bodies. Why are they different? Why are we different shapes and sizes? And afterwards, I was doing some interviewing, and one of the girls said, the thing is, as teenagers, everyone thinks we know about sex and we don't. So, that became a really useful show.
So now there's been a massive disruption in the TV industry, particularly in the last decade. Let's talk about that and why you think it's important to recognize the transferable skills, especially if you've been in that industry.
TV is changing. The way we consume TV is changing. There's so many channels out there. We don't ever kind of just switch on to see what's on television. We don't all watch the same television. It used to be back in the day, there were times where 30 million people would watch EastEnders. Now that doesn't happen because there is so much choice. But it's changing the way we watch it and how frequently we watch it and what we watch. So things like drama are really, really popular. Things like reality shows are pretty popular as well. So that's changing. The other thing is that obviously at the moment we're sort of heading or trying to avoid a recession. And the first place where that goes is advertising revenue. And that's what funds a lot of our programming. So Channel 4 is struggling, ITV is struggling, Channel 5 are struggling. And also the ways advertising works is different as well, because if you're, say, on Netflix, you're flicking, or on demand, you're flicking through the adverts as well. So that's had an effect. The BBC, their license fee hasn't changed in a long, long time. So all these things have meant that it's a very, very difficult time for freelancers working in television. And I think over half aren't working at the moment. So it's really tough time. So you've got these amazingly gifted, creative, experienced freelancers who aren't getting the opportunity to work, which is really frustrating. But what's happening is, I guess, we're having to look at what else is out there. What skills have we got that we can transfer into different worlds or use into different worlds?
Absolutely. And you've actually joined the TechPixies program to do some of that self-discovery, to look at the transferable skills. And one of the first things that we had you do when you came into our training was look at all of the things that you've accomplished, create a success list. Why was that so important for you?
I notice this a lot in my job. When we delve into different people's work and what they do, they don't realize how unique their work is, what they do, what skills are used, because obviously you're doing it and it's not like you bring your friends to work day. And I think particularly in TV, we're not very good at identifying skills outside of television. Our CVs look different. We have a list of credits and what shows we worked on. We don't have our skills within that. We don't say we manage, we lead, we are the best events organizers, we're brilliant with people. All those different things come under different terms. So when it comes to transferring those skills elsewhere, I think we really struggle with that. If you think about the amount of content we produce, why shouldn't we be working with brands? Why shouldn't we be doing social media? There's a whole world out there, but I think especially as you get older, you become quite nervous about presenting yourself and actually even realizing that those are skills that you have. A couple of years ago, there's a couple of people that offered me jobs, and they said the reason why they wanted me is just because I'm so good with people, and that's what makes the show work. And I thought, but that's not a skill. That's just me. But maybe it is,
That's incredible. So what you're saying is all of these people in the TV industry or the media industry, even if you go further into PR, because that's all shifted and changed, and radio's shifted and changed, that, there's a list of, let's say, shows that you've worked on or magazines you've written for or, different things that you've done. But what we're talking about is actually going deeper, a level deeper than that, and saying, okay, when I worked on that show, what was the thing that I actually did? Where was the magic in the work that I did? And teasing that out and being able to say, okay, I've got these skill sets, and actually not taking any skill sets that you might have for granted, because they are very transferable into lots of different industries. Like you said, people who can work with people, that's a very transferable skill and a very important skill in today's marketplace. So that's really interesting. So on top of, looking at the skills that you've got, not just the list of shows you've worked on, right, and going deeper into what roles you played on each of those shows. The other thing that was really helpful for you is getting clarity on a vision. So talk about that piece. Why was that important for you, getting clarity on a vision and having a vision?
I think especially as you get older and maybe as you get a bit battered by definitely being a freelancer. Being a freelancer, you have to hustle. You have to hustle all the time, and you're constantly trying to get a foot in the door, and it becomes exhausting. So then I think, obviously I'm talking about me, but I think this is a general thing. It's very easy to go for what's out there and limit yourself rather than think about what you want and where you want to progress. When I think about when I first got into TV and I was trying to get a job, I would get on the phone and I would look at who was the biggest boss on that program and call them up. Like, I would never do that now. I can't believe that I ever did that even then, because I was so determined to get into television. And then I think when you get to that place, especially if you come from a place where it was never expected that you would reach that, then I think sometimes you stop and you don't give yourself a new vision. What's the new vision? So it's not just having a vision, it's going, when you meet that, well, what's the next one? Where do I need to go next? And not limiting yourself.
I was just having a conversation this morning about a book called The Magic Power of Self-Image Psychology, which is by Maxwell Maltz. It's a book that I recommend to people when they sort of hit that upper limit syndrome, or where they've hit a ceiling in terms of where they're at. And Maxwell Maltz was a plastic surgeon, and he used to do these, perform these amazing plastic surgeries, and then people were still miserable. And he was like, what's the deal? Like, I've done exactly what they wanted me to do. I've made their nose look better, or the way they wanted their nose to look. I've made their chin look the way they wanted to look. There was one particular case that he worked with, which was a young man who wanted a new chin. And he thought that if he got a new chin, his world would change. And so before they did before Maxwell Maltz was going to do the surgery, they had a conversation, and he said, can you like pinpoint when you started feeling this way about your chin, that you got this? And he said he had overheard two people in his family one time saying, oh, he's got the family chin, or something like that. And from that point on, he was self-conscious of this family chin. It affected absolutely everything he was doing. It affected his ability to do interviews and to get jobs, get girlfriends, all that stuff. Like, it really ruined his own interpretation of himself. And anyway, it was in working with him to change his self-image that he didn't end up doing the surgery at all, because he was able to just change the way he felt about his chin. The Maxwell Maltz would be able to change the way that the patient thought about his chin. And in doing so, the patient didn't need surgery. And what he realized is that we can't outperform our self-image. And this is a big staple of his teaching, is that we can't outperform it, but we can change it. And so we use success lists, we can use vision boards, we can use community support, coaching and community support to create a new version of ourselves that we start to believe in. And, and as we get closer and closer to believing in that then, becomes real for us. So first in the mind, then in form. But these are, recognizing when you're up against that glass ceiling is so important. Recognizing when you've got to, you want your chin to change without recognizing that it's just the way you think about your chin that needs to change. These are all really important things for people to understand. The other good book that I really like is by Gay Hendricks. It's called The Big Leap. And he talks about the upper limit problem, which is where, you get out of your comfort zone, and then there's this gravitational pull back to the familiar, and that stops you from moving forward. But the vision piece is so key, and recognizing when the self-sabotage is happening so that you can do something about it, right? So being consciously aware of what's going on so you can do something about it. So the success list helps people to elevate themselves and change, and to see just how talented they are. And then the vision helps them to put focus and direction on what they want to do with those skills. And then I think this third piece, and I think this is really key, and we talked about it in sort of the prep for this, and also for a workshop we're going to be doing in April. But one of the things that you have to recognize is there's a process. So there's a messy middle in the transformation process, when you're going from, okay, I've got these skill sets and I've got a vision, and there's a gap between where I am and where I want to be. There is a very messy middle in the middle of that. And There's another book that I love by Jamie Kern-Lima called Worthy, and she has a whole chapter and section on the transformation of the butterfly. And it's this idea that it's a caterpillar. As a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly, they actually turn into a pile of goo and they eat themselves.
So I'm not sure I'm up with that, but go on.
And it's this idea that actually, when we are transforming our lives, we are like the caterpillar into the butterfly. There's a point where we literally have to break down into a pile of goo and eat our old way of thinking and then come out with a new way of thinking. The thing that really caught me on that story when Jamie tells it is, even when the butterfly comes out of its chrysalis, it's got wings and it can't fly with them because the wings are wet and the wings need to dry before it can fly. So let's talk about
patience needed.
Yes, let's talk about it. So you can have your skill set, you can have your success list, you can have your vision, but you are going to have to go through this messy middle to come out the other side. And what are your top tips for that? Because you've definitely gone through that messy middle.
Oh, I think that's a really interesting question, actually, because when you're in it can be quite tough. And I think having a bit of time off that you're sort of forced to take does make you reevaluate things. And like you say, it's like a reset button, isn't it? So everything that you took for granted, oh, I'll always be able to do this job, suddenly has to change. So I think the first thing is to do something, do anything, and explore any avenue. You know, we say to our kids, don't we, as they're trying to work out what they want to do with their future, you know, there's a reason why they start off doing 20 subjects at school. Give everything a go, see what you like, see what you enjoy, see what you're good at. And then as you get older, it kind of narrows down. In my head, it narrows down a bit too quickly, you know, but eventually the idea is that you find something you like. You do work experience, so you get to do lots of different things. I would love to take a year off and do a different job every 2 weeks. I'd love to go back to work experience. There's things I'd love to try. I'd love to be, you know, on those London buses. I'd love to be a tour guide for a couple of weeks and try that. And there's so many things I just want to see what happens. I was talking to someone about recycling the other day and like the ins and outs of how it actually happens. And I want to know all about the processes. So I think it's about trying stuff, speaking to people, and then committing. I think it's really important that even if you're not 100% sure, commit to it and then see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think, you know, but I would say it's worth getting an idea of the vision before you start taking action, because that's where the vision gives you some direction. And I think that you decide for a life you love in advance of taking that action step. But you lean into the vision to give you guidance on what steps you should take next. I think that's really important. I think everything you've just said is really important. Taking action is really that third piece to the puzzle. You've got your success list, you've got your vision, and you know, you've got to take action through the messy middle and just keep going one foot in front of another. I mean, they do say 1 foot in front of the other will get you to the top of Mount Everest. So if it feels like you're climbing Mount Everest in this rebuild of your career, you might be, you know, but if you take one step forward to another step forward, I mean, I definitely have, and I'd love to hear a story from you. I definitely have stories in my life where I took that action step and didn't know where they were going to lead. I just listened to my intuition. One of the biggest ones is TechPixies, the itself. You know, when I had this idea to build a digital skills school, part of my reasoning for doing that was that not everyone could get to London, where most of the digital skills training was, and have families. And I wanted people to have the ability to learn flexibly and part-time and around their families. And we initially were in person in London and in Oxford. Well, we were initially in Oxford and then we expanded to London and then we went online, and that changed everything going online. But the key piece of this story was I had this idea, and I what came to me were two people to speak with. So, you know, like the idea, so I had this idea, digital skills school. And then it was almost like I had this little voice in my head saying, go talk to these two people. And one person had set up a really successful business that was turning over about $500,000 a year. And I went to go have a conversation with him about the idea. And he said, yeah, I think it's a really good idea, but he didn't really, there wasn't much more he could offer. It was sort of like, I think it's a great idea, but best of luck with that idea. And then the other person that I had sort of this hunch to call was someone who was a network navigator. They sort of knew all the players in Oxford. And I just called him and I said, look, I have this idea. I don't really have any funding for it. And I sort of, by having that first conversation, I realized what I really needed was funding. It wasn't so much about a partner, but it was more a funding partner really is what I needed. And he said to me, you're never going to believe this, but literally this morning, this grant came across my desk for 75,000. They're taking bids up to 20. You should put a bid in. And I did. And within a 10-day period of time, put in a bid, and for 16,000 pounds, because I didn't want to go for the full 20, didn't want to get rejected. Like, let's just go for 16 and we'll make up the other 4. And we got it. But that was a phone call that I picked up the phone and made, I had the idea, the vision for Digital Skills School. That's what we were originally going to call it, Digital Skills School, not TechPixies. And it was that
TechPixies.
Yeah. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, pick up the phone, call someone and say something to them and see what happens. And I think that what you've just described is so important. It's that action step, but I think that action step has to be fueled by the vision. And I think the vision's going to be bigger if you've spent the time working on your success list and you look at your skill set and you say, what do I love doing off of this skill set? What lights me up? And then if I were to do something I really loved, what would that be? And then what's that first action step that I take? But really, like you said, committing to it. This is, you don't have to commit to exactly what you're going to do, but committing to a new way of doing things. And
actually, I think that's the hardest bit, is the vision, because especially if you've had a bit of a knock and you're not working, and I know that a lot of us get our self-worth from our jobs, especially working in television. I mean, I think there's part of me that must be a big show off, because I want everyone to see what I do at work. I want you all to watch it on television. And then people go, oh, I saw that show, Paul, I really enjoyed it. Oh, my mum, I don't think she actually watches any of the shows, but she always says, oh, I saw your credit, darling. And then, so it's a lot, there's a lot of self-worth that goes into that. Often the first thing people say to me after I haven't seen them for a while is, oh, what are you working on at the moment, Paula? And if I haven't got anything to say, instantly I feel like, so in a time where you maybe aren't working as much, plus everyone is taking a step down as well, or a lot of people are taking jobs a grade lower because there's so few jobs, that when it comes to your vision, it's very easy to go with, this will do. This is what I think is within my reach, rather than reaching out and going, what do I really want, without limiting that. And I think actually that's the tricky bit, because I think a lot of people in TV are doers. We like to solve problems. If you've got a problem, we solve it. That's what we do. So when it comes to work, when it comes to finding work, I think we're the same. We've got a problem, we'll solve it. We'll try and fit into it, rather than taking a step back and going, okay, maybe someone could work with me and I would be good enough for them to fit my skills around what they need.
Well, this reminds me of a reel that I really, really love, which I saw. I absolutely love this reel. And it was Reese Witherspoon. I'm a huge fan of hers. She's on my, vision board in terms of someone that I want to work with and one day and meet and spend time with and really get to know.
She's got a production company in the UK now, and she's doing a show with Stacey Solomon for Channel 4 at the moment.
Oh wow! Well, that's awesome.
So you might reach out.
I might, yeah. Well, she's on the show. She's all over my vision board. But what I love about her, she just did a reel. Well, it's been turned into a reel. She gave a speech about how she was cautioned going into her 40s that you should save your money because you're not going to get any jobs in acting in your 40s, and so just prepare yourself for early retirement. That's what people told her. And we'll link to the reel in the show notes because it's just too good to not share. And she says, and I decided I wasn't going to do it that way. She said, instead, I took my money and I invested in me. I loved how she said this. She said, I invested in me. I started my own production company. And she goes, and guess what? I'm getting paid now more than I was ever getting paid before. And she said, I don't say that to brag. She says, I say that to just show how far the industry's come. And I love that she said that, because one of the messages, and this is a really strong message I try and get across to people who are in our boot camps and in our, in our vision workshops and who come into our training, is the most important person you're ever going to invest in is yourself. 100,000%, because you're the only one who has power to the power and dominion to change. You can't change someone else. You can't make someone else think differently. You can't expose somebody else to a new way of thinking and know that they're going to embrace it. So what I loved about that was she said, I bet on myself, and it paid off. And, and you can bet she put a lot of her own money into that. And there were probably some messy middle moments in there. And yet now she has some of the most popular shows available. I was going to say on television, but it's not really on television. She's got some of the most popular shows available. And she's built an incredibly powerful production company. And I just, I have so much respect for that. But I think the key lesson here is, just because someone else doesn't believe in you doesn't give you permission to not believe in yourself. Right? We have got to believe in ourselves first and foremost, and invest in ourselves. And the cool thing is, she's shining a light for every woman out there, not just women.
I was going to say, and even if you even if you feel I'm investing myself, and especially I think as women, we're a little bit apologetic about that. Look at what she's done for other women. She specifically chooses scripts where it's strong female leads. Big Little Lies is a brilliant example of that. That's a brilliant, strong female cast. So she's done well.
She has, but she, and I think that's the point, is no matter where you are in this journey, if you're coming out of TV, radio, PR, all those industries that have been massively disruptive, and even you could argue social media is being disrupted right now by AI. It doesn't mean that there's not a place for you, and it doesn't mean that there's not some that is not possible for you. And I think it's that saying, you're pushed by pain until you're pulled by a vision, or pulled by purpose. So it's this idea that don't give up on yourself, right? It's important to believe in yourself. And if you believe in yourself and you don't give up on yourself, you also show other people what is possible. And that's why I love that you came onto this podcast, because you've gone through this incredible disruption in your industry. And yet here you are, a shining example of someone who doesn't give up on herself and invests in herself and advances herself. And there's going to be a lot of fruit that comes from that.
Well, look, I think I really like learning. I'm not a person that goes in there and says, I know it all, which maybe isn't a good thing. I don't know. But I think to continually learn, even in your own job, the more I do my job, the more I realize I have to learn, which isn't a bad thing. It just means that I understand that world more. You kind of get into the nitty gritty and are central to these debates. And I think, anything you can do just to, keep learning and growing and accept things are going to change. I remember a few years ago when my kids were at primary school, speaking to their head and saying, how do you prepare children for a world where 50% of the jobs that exist now won't exist? They'll all be different. That world will look completely different. And she said, it's resilience. That's what you do. You give them resilience. And then I went to another talk where they said, actually, resilience is an outcome. It's not an action, which means that you have to do things to become resilient. Eat well, sleep well, exercise, use your brain, try new things, all those things that will build resilience. And
fail at things.
Fail at things. Exactly.
You've got to go for something that scares you, and then you got to fail at it. That builds resilience.
And that is, it sounds, that's so nice, failing at something and then you learn from it next time. But it's scary. If you mess up at work, or if you mess up on something, that can stay with you. So how do you move on from that and learn from it and not beat yourself up about it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, knowing, that's what I love. It's one of the things I teach in Dream Builder, is knowing that fear and failure are prerequisites for success. If you're not failing, you're not in the game, right? If you're not scared, it's not a big enough dream, right? Thanks so much.
Everyone does it. No one's perfect, even though they might present themselves. And especially, you know, we all know it in a world of social media where everyone's brilliant and everyone's doing so well, when you feel like you're not.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and that's, you know, the important thing here is to know that we don't want to compare and despair. You know, you don't want to compare someone else's front stage to your backstage, right? That might be very, very messy compared to their front stage, which is polished and clean, and, you know, they've been through the ringer, right? So it's so important not to do that. But lifelong learning is absolutely key to continuing to move forwards. And I think in the world we live in, if you're not learning, you're not living, you know, really in the long term.
I've always said that. I used this the other day and my friend went, "What?" I said, "I don't want to be the mum holding the coats." So, you know, you get to a certain time where the kids go and do activities, dad maybe goes and joins them, and mum's left holding the coats. I want to be in there. I want to be participating, whether that's finding out about new things or, just getting involved.
I love that. Well, we have a workshop coming up for people who are in industries that are being disrupted, like the TV industry. On the 23rd of April, 8 to 9 p.m., we're going to be doing a workshop, Paula and I, all about this transferable skills for people in the TV industry that has been massively disrupted. So you go to techpixies.com/TP workshops. Really looking forward to doing that with you.
Yeah,
and and this was her idea. She came to me and she said, "I've got this idea. People need this. Let's build it together." So
there's just so many talented people out there who aren't being fulfilled and who need, you know, have got so much to offer. It's just about feeling guided and feeling nurtured, I think, and feeling noticed, you know.
Well, Nadia says, "I love that, Paula, no coat holding." And then Tracy, who's watching on Instagram, says, "Put the coats in the car."
Yeah. In the boot.
In the boot. All right. So if you want to find out about that, you can go to techpixies.com/TP workshops. You'll be able to sign up if you're in that TV industry or in any disrupted industry and want to get some transfer, you know, have some real tangible tools to help you get clear on your skill set, to get clear on your vision, and to get a tactic or two to work through the messy middle. So thanks, Paula. And where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Oh, so on Instagram, I'm producer Campo, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well, Paula Campion Skerry.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, there you go. You heard it there. We've got someone who's gone through this massive transformation, who's going to help navigate others through it as well. And you'll want to join us for that joint workshop at the end of April, 23rd of April, 8 to 9 p.m. There'll be more information forthcoming, and there'll be links in the show notes. I really appreciate you listening. We are just thrilled beyond thrilled. We've made some major milestones recently. Over 24,000 followers in our community online across all of our social media networks. So if you're not connected into our community, if you're not following us, if you're not engaging with our content, please go find us. We're TechPixies on all of the social media networks. We passed our 500 subscribers on YouTube mark. We've passed our 100,000 downloads on the podcast. And of course, we've got big visions for the future. So if you would like to know how TechPixies can help you, please go to support@techpixies.com and email us. And we'd love to figure out how we can help you move forward with whatever it is that you want to move forward, either something in your life, a big dream, a big goal that you've got, or just navigating social media and what that's all about. So if you have any questions, feel free to message us, support@techpixies.com. Thanks again for listening. So grateful to have you here with us live, or if you're listening on the replay, thanks for taking the time. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week.